Hi Reddit. My name is Celeste Monroe, and I'm 27 years old now, but when this story started, I was barely 18 and thought I had the whole world figured out. Spoiler, I didn't. I grew up in a small, dusty town in Oklahoma. It's the kind of place with one grocery store, 2 gas stations, and neighbors who know when you sneeze before you do. My mom, Martha Monroe, raised me by herself. My dad disappeared when I was 4. I have a blurry memory of him slamming the screen door, his boots hitting the porch steps, and my mom standing there with tears drying on her cheeks. After that, it was just us. Mom worked at the local library during the day and cleaned offices at night. She'd come home so tired that some nights she'd just sit on the couch in her cleaning uniform, still wearing yellow rubber gloves, too exhausted to take them off. But no matter how little we had, she always had this envelope. She kept it in a box under her bed. When I was about 7, I asked her what was inside. She pulled it out and showed me a stack of crumpled bills and some bank slips. "This is for you, Celeste," she said. "Someday you're gonna get out of here. You're gonna see the world. Go to college. Get a degree. This is your future." I carried that promise like a secret badge. At school, when other kids made fun of my hand-me-down jeans or the way my backpack was always duct-taped at the seams, I just smiled to myself. I had a ticket out. One day, I'd be bigger than this dusty town, bigger than the cracked sidewalks and empty parking lots. I'd be someone. I wasn't a bad student. I wasn't a genius either. I got B's, sometimes an A if the teacher liked me enough to round up my grades. I joined debate club because it felt fancy, like something kids from big cities did. And I dreamed all the time. I'd sit by the window at night and stare out at the flat black fields and tell myself I'd never be stuck here forever. Mom kept saving. Every birthday, every holiday, even when the washing machine broke or the car wouldn't start, she'd figure it out without ever touching that envelope. She'd smile at me over our chipped kitchen table and say, "One day, you'll thank me." When I finally got my acceptance letter, a small liberal arts college in Chicago, we cried together in our cramped living room. She said, "It's happening, baby. You're really going." I didn't know then how much that envelope weighed in her heart. How many lonely nights she'd traded for it. I just knew I was getting out. I remember the day we packed my bags. Mom folded each shirt like she was tucking away a piece of herself. She made me promise to call every Sunday. She pressed $200 in cash into my hand and said, "For emergencies only." I hugged her so tight at the bus station that her glasses left a mark on my cheek. I watched her shrink through the window as the bus pulled away, one hand raised, wiping tears with her sleeve. I arrived in Chicago thinking I was unstoppable. For the first time in my life, no one knew who I was. I could be anyone. I could be Celeste Monroe, the girl who ordered cocktails with fancy names and wore real leather boots and posted rooftop selfies at 2 a.m. I told myself I deserved it. I'd spent 18 years waiting, hadn't I? I'd earned a little fun. A little indulgence. I didn't tell Mom how much rent really cost, or how easy it was to swipe my card for dinners I couldn't pronounce. I made new friends, people who wore designer sneakers and didn't bat an eye at dropping $100 on drinks. For a while, I felt like I'd made it. I'd get up at noon, skip half my classes, and spend my evenings at rooftop bars or packed clubs, dancing under neon lights until the city spun around me in dizzy colors. I'd open that envelope she'd given me, my future, and take a few bills out when my account ran low. Just enough to make it to next week, I'd promise myself. Just enough until I got my next scholarship check. Except the checks didn't come. And I didn't pass enough classes to keep my grants. I didn't care. I told myself I'd figure it out later. I was living my best life now. By the time winter came around, Chicago was frozen and so was I, inside and out. The friends I'd bought drinks for found new people to party with. The landlord slipped eviction notices under my door like grim little reminders that my future was bleeding away, one overdraft at a time. I ignored Mom's calls when I could. When she asked how I was doing, I lied. Everything's great, Mom. Classes are amazing. I'm making so many connections. She sounded so proud that I hated her for it. I hated myself more. By the end of that year, there was nothing left of the envelope but an empty box under my bed, just like back home. And so I did the one thing I never thought I'd do. I bought a bus ticket back to Oklahoma. I remember the bus ride home like a fever dream, hours of flat highways and rain-streaked windows. I sat pressed against the cold glass, hugging my backpack like it could shield me from what waited on the other end. Every mile closer to home felt like an iron chain tightening around my chest. I didn't call Mom to tell her I was coming. I didn't want to hear her voice. Didn't want to hear the crack in it when she realized her daughter, her pride and joy, was slinking back with nothing but a duffel bag and maxed-out credit cards. When the bus finally pulled into the station, the same spot where she'd waved goodbye to me a year before, she wasn't there. I hadn't asked her to come. I dragged my bag through the parking lot under the dead yellow glow of the streetlights and called a cab. The driver was a guy named Ray who used to deliver our mail when I was a kid. He didn't say much, but he glanced at me in the rearview like he recognized the shape of my shame. When we pulled up in front of the house, our house, I just sat there for a second, staring at the sagging porch and the cracked steps. It looked smaller than I remembered. Smaller than the dreams I'd built inside it. Mom was waiting by the door. She must have seen the headlights, because she stepped out into the porch light in her robe and slippers, arms crossed over her chest. I braced myself for the explosion, for the shouting, the sobbing, the heartbreak I knew I deserved. But when I stepped onto the porch, dragging my bag behind me like an anchor, she just looked at me. Her eyes flicked down to my scuffed boots, the expensive coat I'd bought in Chicago that couldn't hide how thin I'd gotten, how tired I looked. She didn't say a word at first. Just opened the door and stepped aside. Inside, the house smelled the same, old wood and coffee and the faint trace of her lavender laundry detergent. It made my eyes burn. She gestured for me to sit at the kitchen table. The same table where she'd counted out bills into that envelope every payday. The same table where I'd promised her I'd make her proud. I sat. My bag hit the floor with a dull thud. I opened my mouth, ready for excuses, for some kind of apology that would make any of this better. But she held up a hand. "Don't," she said. Her voice was calm. Too calm. That scared me more than yelling ever could have. "I don't want your sorries, Celeste." I shut my mouth. She poured herself a cup of coffee, stale from the pot that must have been sitting since dinner, and took a sip like she was weighing her next words carefully. Finally, she set the cup down and looked me in the eye. "Did you spend it all?" she asked. I swallowed. My throat felt like sandpaper. "Yeah. Every penny?" I nodded. I couldn't look at her for more than a second. My hands twisted in my lap, fingernails biting into my palms. She just sighed. Not a disappointed sigh, not angry, more like she'd just put down something heavy she'd been carrying for too long. "Good," she said. I blinked. I was sure I'd misheard. "What?" "Good," she repeated, louder this time. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "I'm glad you spent it all." I felt my cheeks burn. "How can you say that?" "I wasted everything you worked for." "I ruined." "You didn't ruin anything I wasn't ready to lose," she cut in sharply. Her eyes softened, but her tone didn't. "That money was never about the dollars, Celeste. It was about giving you a chance. You took it. You spent it. Now you know what it's worth. And what it isn't." I stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "I don't understand." She stood, came over to me, and put a hand on my shoulder, the same hand that used to brush my hair behind my ear when I cried over scraped knees or bad grades. "Now you know," she said quietly, "that money doesn't fall from the sky. That people won't save you just because you're pretty or fun to be around. Now you know how easy it is to lose what took years to earn." I wanted her to yell. I wanted her to hate me, because then I could hate myself and feel righteous about it. But she didn't give me that. Instead, she squeezed my shoulder once and said, "You're gonna get a job. Maybe 2. Maybe 3. You're gonna pay bills. You're gonna feel every dollar you spent like a splinter under your skin. And one day, when you have a daughter, maybe you'll do the same for her. Maybe you'll teach her better." She turned and walked down the hallway to her bedroom. Before she shut the door behind her, she called out, "There's clean sheets in the hall closet. Get some sleep." And just like that, I was alone at the kitchen table. No screaming. No lectures. Just the deafening echo of my own failure and a mother who somehow, impossibly, still loved me enough to let me sit there with it. That night, I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling. The quiet house wrapped around me like a scratchy blanket. I thought about Chicago, the bars, the clubs, the fake friends. The money that had felt so endless in my hand until it was gone. I thought about Mom, who'd traded her best years scrubbing floors for a dream I'd pissed away in 12 months. And I knew she was right. Tomorrow, I'd get up. I'd figure it out. Because this time, there was no envelope waiting to save me. The next morning, sunlight poured through the living room window too bright for someone who hadn't slept a wink. I lay there on the old plaid couch, listening to the floor creak as Mom moved around the kitchen. The smell of coffee and toast drifted over, so painfully normal it made my chest hurt. When I finally sat up, my back ached from the couch springs digging into my ribs all night. I could hear Mom humming to herself, an old tune she used to sing when I was little. I dragged myself to the kitchen, half expecting her to look at me with disappointment. But when she turned around, she just slid a plate of toast in front of me and poured me a cup of coffee. No sugar, no cream, I'd have to earn that sweetness again. We didn't say much. The hum of the refrigerator and the click of her spoon against her mug were the only sounds. She didn't ask what I was going to do. She didn't tell me what to do either. She just sat there, sipping her coffee, eyes focused somewhere far past me. After breakfast, she stood and picked up her purse. "I have to get to the library. There's a list of numbers on the fridge. Call them." "Numbers for what?" I asked, but she was already slipping her arms into her old brown coat. "Jobs," she said simply. She paused at the door and looked back at me. "If you want to stay here, you pay your share. You don't get a free ride anymore." Then she left, and I was alone again. I stood at that fridge for what felt like hours, forehead pressed against the cool white surface. A neatly written sheet of paper was stuck under a smiley face magnet, Mom's careful handwriting listing phone numbers for diners, the grocery store, the gas station, even a cleaning service. No dream jobs. Just jobs. I picked up the phone, dialed the first number. The man at the other end sounded tired, but he told me to come in the next morning for an interview bussing tables at Joe's Diner. By lunch, I'd lined up 2 more interviews, cashier at Corner Mart, part-time janitor at the middle school. The irony stung. I'd run away from small-town life, the smell of burnt coffee, the creak of old floors, and here I was crawling right back into it. That night, I lay on the couch again, my phone buzzing with messages I didn't want to read. Back in Chicago, my old crowd must have noticed I'd vanished. A few half-hearted, "Where'd you go?" texts, a couple of "miss you." I deleted them all. If they didn't miss me when my money ran dry, they sure as hell didn't miss me now. The next few days blurred together. I put on my best fake smile and shook hands with managers who didn't care what college I'd almost gone to. They cared that I'd show up on time and clean up spills without complaining. By the end of the week, I had 3 part-time jobs. My days started at Joe's Diner at 5 in the morning. I'd wipe down sticky counters, haul trays of half-eaten pancakes, and smile at truckers who tipped in crumpled singles. Then I'd run home, change my uniform, and clock in at Corner Mart, where I rang up scratch tickets and cheap beer for people whose faces I'd known since childhood. Nights, I pushed a mop down the shiny hallway of the middle school, the same school where I used to dream about the city lights. Sometimes I'd catch my reflection in the glass trophy case near the principal's office. The same girl, but smaller somehow. More worn down around the edges. At first, Mom didn't say much. She'd be sitting at the kitchen table when I stumbled in after midnight, her glasses perched on her nose, an open book in her hands. She never asked how my day went. She didn't need to. She just glanced at the clock, nodded once, and turned a page. One night, I came home with bleach stains on my jeans, my feet screaming in cheap sneakers that didn't fit right. I dropped onto the couch and found her waiting in the kitchen with a bowl of leftover stew. She slid it across the table to me. Eat. I wanted to snap at her, to say I wasn't hungry, but I was too tired to pretend. I ate in silence while she watched. When I pushed the bowl away, she reached across the table and took my hand. Her palm was warm and rough, the skin cracked from years of cleaning products and paperbacks. "You're doing it," she said softly. No judgment, no pity. Just the truth. "You're learning." I wanted to tell her I hated it, that every dollar I earned felt like a drop of water in a bucket with a hole in it. But the words stuck in my throat. Because under all the exhaustion, under all the shame, there was something else growing. Something like understanding. A month passed. Then 2. Paychecks came and went. Some nights, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, adding up tips and wages in my head. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly how much a dollar was worth. How many hours it took to earn. How fast it disappeared if you weren't careful. One night, after a particularly long shift at the diner, I found Mom waiting for me at the kitchen table. But this time, she had 2 mugs of tea instead of just one. "Sit," she said. I did. My legs were trembling from standing all day, but I didn't complain. She pushed one of the mugs toward me. "I want you to start putting something aside," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was steel in it. $5 here. 10 there. Doesn't matter how small. You put it away. For what? I asked. My voice cracked. "I'm barely making enough to help with the bills." She smiled, not a big smile, but enough to soften the tired lines around her eyes. "For your future." Again. The word hit me like a slap. Future. I'd thought I'd buried mine in Chicago, drowned it in overpriced cocktails and rooftop selfies. But here it was, resurrected, tiny and fragile like a seed pushing up through frozen dirt. I looked at my mother, the woman who had given me everything, lost it all, and still sat here telling me to try again. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." She reached across the table, squeezed my hand once. "Good girl." And for the first time in months, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I could be one. Spring rolled in slow and stubborn, the way it always did in Oklahoma, cold mornings turning to warm afternoons that smelled faintly of damp grass and engine oil from passing trucks. By then, I had a rhythm, mornings at Joe's, afternoons at Corner Mart, nights with my mop at the middle school. My hands were raw, my back a constant dull ache, but I counted my dollars and tucked away every scrap I could. 5 here. 10 there. A wrinkled 20 from tips folded neatly in a chipped coffee mug I kept under the couch. My secret little envelope, just like Mom's, only this time, it wasn't for parties or leather boots or neon lights. It was for a phone bill, a cavity filling I'd been putting off, the emergency brake light that kept flickering on Mom's ancient sedan. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch Mom peeking under the couch when she thought I wasn't looking, just to see that mug was still there. She never said anything. She didn't need to. The people at Joe's diner got to know me fast. Doris, the head waitress, liked to tell me stories about her ex-husbands while she smoked behind the dumpster on break. She'd squint at me through a cloud of smoke and bark, "Don't be dumb like me, Celeste. Don't let a man empty your pockets." At Corner Mart, I rang up the same old faces every day. Old Mr. Wilkins, who always forgot his lottery numbers and called me Sweet Pea. Tiny Margie O'Hara, who came in twice a day for milk she never finished. Some days it felt like the same 10 people shuffled in and out on a loop. But each one handed me $1, a 5, a 10, and each time I heard the soft thunk of the cash drawer, I knew exactly how many minutes of my life that money had cost me. The middle school was the hardest. The halls smelled like floor wax and stale pencil shavings. I'd push my mop past faded lockers, past the trophy case with my old debate team photo. Sometimes I'd stand in front of it, mop dripping onto the linoleum, staring at my own frozen smile. 17-year-old Celeste, all bright eyes and big ideas, the future wrapped in neat illusions. After a while, the exhaustion stopped feeling so heavy. I got used to my feet hurting, to the sound of my alarm at 4:30 a.m., to counting out coins for gas and groceries. Little by little, I got faster at counting change, better at faking a polite smile even when customers threw crumpled bills at me or yelled because we were out of their brand of smokes. And at home, Mom started leaving sticky notes on the fridge again, just like when I was a kid. Little reminders: left you some soup on the stove. Don't forget your lunch. Proud of you. Those 3 words, scribbled in her slanted, careful handwriting, felt like an extra $1 in my pocket every time I saw them. One evening, Doris asked me if I wanted to cover an extra shift. A Saturday night fry cook hadn't shown up, something about a fight with his girlfriend and a trip to Tulsa that never happened. I didn't know how to work the fryer, but Doris slapped an apron on me and pointed me at the baskets. An hour in, I burned my wrist pulling onion rings out too fast. Doris pressed ice against the burn and told me I'd done good anyway. She handed me $40 under the table before I left that night. Next time, she winked, don't flinch at the oil. It smells fear. I walked home in the warm spring air, $40 extra pressed to my chest like a medal. I didn't call Mom to tell her. I wanted her to see the slow magic for herself. 2 weeks later, I found a crumpled college brochure jammed in the mail slot. I knew Mom had put it there, the local community college just 2 towns over. Cheap tuition, night classes, the kind of place people like me went when they had no other choice left. When I sat down at the kitchen table that night, she pretended to be reading, but her eyes kept darting to the folded brochure at my elbow. I traced the college name with my finger, feeling my stomach twist. I can't afford this. She didn't look up. Not yet. I'd have to keep working all 3 jobs. Probably. I waited for her to say more, to promise she'd help, that we'd find a way together. But she didn't. She just flipped a page in her book, like it was all up to me. And it was. I knew that now. No envelope under the bed this time. No miracle stash of cash. Just me, my mop, my cash register, my tips, and the slow drip of dollars building towards something I might dare to call a future. That night, I lay on the couch again, the brochure on my chest, the cheap paper warm from my skin. I thought about Chicago, the city lights, the rooftop selfies, the nights I thought money made me untouchable. And then I thought about the $5 bill in my coffee mug. About Doris's burnt cigarettes and Margie's forgotten milk. About Mom, falling asleep at the kitchen table with a book pressed to her cheek. I closed my eyes and whispered into the dark, next time, I won't waste it. I wasn't sure if I believed it yet. But it was a start. Spring bled into summer, and the heat came down like an iron lid over our little town. The kind of thick, sticky heat that made the diner's fryers roar louder, the gas station's front door stick in its frame, and the school's old pipes groan when I ran the mop bucket under them. But I didn't mind the heat. I barely felt it anymore. My hands were always damp anyway, from dish soap, from mopping solution, from counting out sticky dollar bills and sweaty coins. And every drop of sweat felt like penance. Like proof I wasn't that same careless girl who'd blown through her mother's life savings like confetti. Mom noticed, though she didn't say much. She'd leave extra bottles of water in the fridge labeled Celeste in her tidy block letters. Sometimes I'd find my uniform washed and drying on the line before I even asked. Small things, the only language she used these days for love. I got used to the routine. Early mornings before dawn, the quiet hum of my old alarm clock, the creak of floorboards as I tried not to wake Mom. Cold water on my face to force my eyes open, stale toast eaten standing up, shoes with the soles coming loose from too many shifts back to back. I started to see the same people every day, people I'd grown up around but never really seen. Like Jenny Carter, who came into Joe's every Tuesday for the same thing: scrambled eggs, toast, black coffee. She'd sit at the corner booth near the window, scribbling in a battered notebook that looked ready to fall apart. She never tipped much, she didn't have it to spare, but she smiled at me like we were in on some secret together. At Corner Mart, old Mr. Wilkins began calling me Miss College, a joke that stung at first, but then turned warm around the edges as I realized he meant it kindly. I'd hand him his change, and he'd wink. "You'll get there, Celeste. Just you wait." Sometimes, in the middle school hallway, I'd pause by the window near the back doors. I'd push the mop aside and stand there for a moment, watching the sky go dark over the soccer field where I used to sit with friends, dreaming about Chicago. It wasn't regret that sat in my chest anymore, not exactly. More like an ache, quiet and steady, that reminded me to keep moving. One afternoon, after my shift at Joe's, Doris cornered me by the register. "You ever think about moving up?" she asked. I blinked. "Moving up where?" She jabbed her cigarette toward the kitchen. "Kitchen help. Or maybe hostessing. More pay. You're reliable. I can teach you to run the books if you want." It wasn't a fancy offer, no corner office, no big title. But to me, it felt like someone had cracked a window open in a stuffy room. "Yeah," I said. "I'd like that." Doris slapped my shoulder hard enough to sting. "Good girl. I'll tell Joe." When she walked away, I caught my reflection in the metal napkin dispenser, greasy hair pinned up in a loose bun, dark circles under my eyes, a splatter of ketchup on my collar. But under all that, there was something new, a glint that looked suspiciously like fight. That night, I spread my tips on the coffee table, 1s and 5s and a few sweaty 10s. I counted them twice, then tucked a crisp 20 into my secret mug. Mom sat across from me, pretending to read, but I saw her eyes flick to the money. "Promotion?" she asked without looking up. I shrugged. "Maybe." "Good." She turned a page, but her mouth twitched at the corner. Pride was a quiet thing in our house, a flicker, not a flame. By August, I'd saved up enough to register for one night class, just one. Intro to Business, Thursday nights at 7 p.m. It was all I could afford between shifts. The day I mailed the check, I stood in line at the post office sweating through my shirt, praying it wouldn't bounce. When the acceptance letter came, I didn't tell Mom right away. I tucked it into my pocket and carried it with me all day at Joe's, running my thumb over the cheap envelope every chance I got. After my shift, I slipped into Corner Mart early and told Margie O'Hara, who squealed and hugged me so tight my ribs popped. "Good for you, honey," she whispered, her hair smelling like old lilacs. "Your mama must be so proud." That night, I laid the letter in front of Mom at the kitchen table. She read it once, twice. Then she set it down and pushed her glasses up her nose. "Night class," she said. "You'll be tired." "I'm already tired." A tiny snort of laughter escaped her, more sound than I'd heard from her in weeks. She reached across the table, took my hand, squeezed. "Good girl," she murmured. And that was all she said. But it was enough to stitch something in my chest back together, a scrap of old hope, patched and frayed, but real. I'd thought once that money was freedom, that if I had enough, I could be anyone. But sitting there in our cracked vinyl kitchen chair, hands sticky from tips and diner grease, I realized money wasn't freedom at all. Earning it, really earning it, was. Fall came on fast that year, cool winds cutting through the muggy heat, the sky taking on that sharp, clear blue that made the days feel shorter even before the clocks changed. By then, my body had learned the rhythm of exhaustion, muscles stiff in the morning, feet throbbing at night, mind buzzing on cheap coffee and stubborn resolve. I kept my mug under the couch, my little secret safe of crumpled bills. Every week I fed it whatever scraps I could, a habit stitched into my bones now. Mom never asked how much was in there. She just made sure my uniforms were clean, my work shoes patched when they split at the seams. My Thursday night class at Red River Community College was held in a squat brick building 2 towns over. I'd leave my evening shift at Corner Mart, sprint to my battered old car, the same Honda Mom used to drive me to church in, and coast down the 2-lane highway with the windows cracked open. The drive felt like a breath between lives: Celeste the cashier, Celeste the janitor, Celeste the student trying to claw something back from the ashes. The first time I walked into that classroom, I nearly turned around and left. Everyone looked so young. Eager kids straight out of high school, community college lifers working toward degrees, one thin class at a time. I found an empty seat in the back, slumped low in my chair, and kept my eyes on my notebook while Professor Thompson, a wiry man with a tired face and kind eyes, scribbled terms like asset and liability on the whiteboard. I'd spend half the class fighting sleep, my mind drifting to the list of chores waiting for me: the mop bucket at the school, Doris's new stock orders at Joe's, the receipts in my apron pocket. But every time my eyes drooped, I'd force myself awake. Because this hour and a half every Thursday, felt like a promise. A fragile one, maybe, but mine all the same. It didn't take long for Mom to notice the difference. I'd come home on Thursday nights buzzing with something like adrenaline. She'd be at the table waiting, her open book forgotten beside a cold cup of tea. "Learn anything good?" she'd ask, always the same question. And I'd tell her. About balance sheets. About tiny business case studies we read out loud in class. About Professor Thompson's corny jokes that somehow made the night feel less heavy. She'd listen, nodding, her eyes soft with something I hadn't seen in her since before Chicago: hope. Not hope that I'd be famous or rich, but hope that I'd learn to carry myself forward without sinking. Work didn't stop just because I was studying. If anything, it got harder. Doris kept her word. She trained me on the books, showed me how to restock, handle petty cash. She'd bark at me when I made mistakes but clapped me on the shoulder when I got it right. At Corner Mart, my shifts stretched longer when someone called out. I'd stand behind the register, half listening to customers rant about gas prices, my mind quietly calculating how much I needed to make rent, chip in for groceries, save for tuition. At the school, the same dusty trophy case waited for me every night. I'd mop past it, catch my reflection, and sometimes, just sometimes, nod at that frozen, naive version of myself staring back through the glass. We were the same girl now, just less foolish. One night, after a long shift, I came home to find Mom sitting on the porch with a half-finished cup of coffee balanced on the rail. She looked up at me with a tired smile. "You know what today is?" she asked. I shrugged. I was too beat to think. "Thursday?" She laughed softly. 3 years ago today, I drove you to that bus station." I froze, keys dangling from my fingers. For a second, I was 18 again, bright-eyed, head full of skyscrapers and rooftop bars, heart fat with my mother's sacrifices I didn't yet understand. "I know," I said quietly. "I think about it too." She patted the porch swing next to her. I sat, the wood creaking under our weight. "I was angry, you know," she said after a long moment. "Not when you spent it, but when you came back so small. You were always so big in my mind. I hated that you looked so ashamed." I felt the burn behind my eyes before I could stop it. I was ashamed. She took my hand, squeezed it hard enough to ground me. "Good. Shame means you cared. Means you knew it mattered." We sat there together while the cicadas hummed in the dark. She didn't have to say she was proud of me. I could feel it in the silence between us, in the warmth of her palm, in the way she didn't flinch when I leaned my head on her shoulder like I used to when I was little. That fall, I passed my first class with AB+. I taped the grade report to the fridge under the smiley face magnet Mom always used. She didn't say anything when she saw it the next morning. She just left a note beside it, more where that came from, right? Right. The next semester, I signed up for 2 classes, business writing and intro to accounting. I told Doris at Joe's. She slapped a 50 into my apron pocket that night. "Pay me back when you own the place," she barked, turning away before I could argue. At the middle school, I scraped gum off desks and repeated balance sheet formulas under my breath. I rang up cigarettes and lotto tickets at Corner Mart with flashcards tucked beside the till. Every dollar counted. Every hour hurt. But for the first time since that bus pulled away to Chicago, every day felt like it was pulling me somewhere better. Winter came early that year, brittle winds that rattled the old windows of our house, dusting the yard in a mean crust of frost before Thanksgiving even showed up. By then, I'd settled into my new normal, a patchwork of shifts, classes, late-night study sessions at the kitchen table with Mom dozing off in her chair beside me. I worked, I studied, I counted my tips, I packed leftovers for lunch. My uniform at Joe's smelled like fryer oil no matter how many times I washed it. My Corner Mart apron was soft at the edges from constant wear. And every week, that battered coffee mug under the couch got a little heavier. One Thursday after class, Professor Thompson stopped me on my way out. He held my last paper in one hand, thumb tapping the grade at the top corner, A-. You ever think about going full-time, Celeste? He asked, adjusting his crooked glasses. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt impossible. I don't think my bank account would survive. He nodded, like he'd expected that answer. You're sharp. You know that? Most people struggle with this stuff. But you get it. You work hard. I shrugged, hugging my books to my chest. Hard work's about all I got left. He smiled then, not the polite teacher smile, but something real, warm. Sometimes that's enough. Keep going. He didn't know about the mop bucket. The long hours on my feet. The nights I fell asleep at the kitchen table, my cheek pressed to open pages. But maybe he didn't need to. Maybe it was enough that he saw the part of me I was trying to save. That weekend, I found Mom at the kitchen table surrounded by papers, old bills, faded pay stubs, a stack of coupons. She had her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, a pencil stuck behind one ear. What's all this? I asked, setting down my bag of groceries, the groceries I paid for that week, not her. She didn't look up. Budget. I raised an eyebrow. A budget? She stabbed a finger at a yellowed envelope in front of her, the same battered one she'd once hidden under her bed, the one that used to hold my future. Thought maybe you'd help me make it work better this time. My throat went tight. I sat down across from her, pushing aside a pile of old receipts. Yeah, I said. Yeah, okay. We stayed up late, bent over numbers and scraps of paper, whispering about bills and meal plans and how to stash a few dollars away each month. I showed her what I'd learned about spreadsheets in class, how to balance tiny savings against groceries and gas. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't feel like the city lights I'd once chased. But it felt real, a future stitched together from late nights and cheap coffee and her hands steadying mine when my math got fuzzy from fatigue. By Christmas, the diner was slammed with travelers and locals looking for cheap pie and warm coffee. Doris put me on extra shifts, letting me ring up orders and handle the cash register when Joe was busy yelling at the dishwasher. You got a head for this, she'd grumble between cigarette breaks. Don't waste it. At Corner Mart, Mr. Wilkins started slipping me peppermint candies from his pocket when he came in for scratch tickets. For your finals, he'd wink, though I didn't have finals in night class. I took them anyway. Margie O'Hara left a tiny tin of homemade cookies for me on Christmas Eve. Sugar cookies shaped like stars, half crushed by the time I got home. I ate them sitting on the porch steps, blowing warm breath into the cold night air, watching the streetlights flicker. Christmas morning was quiet, just me and Mom and the hum of the old space heater. There weren't presents under the tree, not like when I was a kid and she'd stretch her paycheck just to get me a second-hand doll or a new coat. But there was coffee, and leftover pie from Joe's, and the soft warmth of her smile when she handed me a tiny wrapped box. Inside was a single silver key. It's to the back room, she said when I looked at her, confused. I cleaned it out. Figured maybe you'd want a space for your books. A desk. A room. My own space, somewhere I could study without perching at the kitchen table surrounded by bills and old cereal boxes. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to do that. That the couch was fine. But the words wouldn't come out. Instead, I hugged her, the kind of hug I hadn't given her since before Chicago swallowed me up. She smelled like old laundry soap and coffee. "Thank you," I whispered into her shoulder. "I'll use it. I promise." The new year rolled in with no fireworks, no rooftop selfies, no fancy parties. Just me in my new back room, sitting at a wobbly desk Mom found at the thrift store. My book stacked neatly beside a chipped mug of instant coffee. My secret savings mug tucked under the desk, heavier now than I'd ever managed to save in Chicago. No bright lights. Just the soft hum of the heater, the scratch of my pen on paper, and Mom's quiet footsteps in the hall as she peeked in to check if I'd fallen asleep over my work. I knew then, deep in my bones, that I'd never waste it again. Not the money. Not the hours. Not her faith in me. Every dollar. Every hour. Every tear she'd shed alone in this house when I was gone, I'd make it count. Spring came back around before I even realized the cold had slipped away. The frost vanished from the grass, the trees budded green again, and the sun started to hang a little longer in the sky when I stumbled home after another double shift. By then, my days had a pulse I could count on: up before dawn, diner apron tied tight, corner mart register dinging like a heartbeat, mop handle squeaking down the middle school halls. Thursdays, my battered Honda rattled down the highway for night classes, 2 now, not just 1, the syllabi tucked into my backpack next to my tips. I kept the mug under my new desk now. The small back room Mom cleared for me had become my cave, my bunker, my proof that nothing wasted had to stay wasted forever. Some nights, I'd slide the mug out, pour the money onto the floor, and count every wrinkled bill and tarnished coin by hand, just to remind myself, this time it's real. This time it's mine. One Thursday, Professor Thompson pulled me aside again after class. He looked tired as ever, sleeves rolled up, chalk dust on his cuffs. "You ever think about applying for the local scholarship fund?" he asked. I just laughed, shaking my head. "Professor, my GPA's not exactly Harvard material." He held my latest test up between 2 fingers, a bright red A across the top. "Don't sell yourself short, Celeste," he said, like it was the simplest thing in the world. Sometimes they don't care about perfect grades. They care about people who won't quit. I stood there in the hallway for a long time after he left, the echo of his shoes on the linoleum carrying farther than it should have. I turned my phone over in my hand, thought about all the lies I'd told my mom from that same hallway in Chicago. "I'm fine, Mom. I'm doing great, Mom." And decided I was done lying. Even to myself. That night, I came home and found Mom asleep at the kitchen table, an old paperback open under her cheek. I woke her gently, the way she used to wake me when I'd fall asleep doing homework back in high school. "Hey," I said. "Thinking about applying for a scholarship." She blinked the sleep from her eyes, squinting at me like she wasn't sure she'd heard right. Then she just nodded, once, sharp and certain. "About time." I wrote the application in my tiny back room, fingers cramping around a pen that kept running out of ink. I told them the truth, about my mom, the envelope, the wasted money and the night scrubbing floors to earn it all back. I didn't dress it up. I didn't beg. I just told it straight, like Doris always said, "Don't waste anyone's time. They'll respect you for it." I didn't think I'd get it. Who gives free money to someone who'd already blown their shot once? But a month later, I found the letter waiting on the porch, the envelope thin and official and terrifying. I sat on the steps while the dusk turned purple around me, my breath caught in my throat as I read the words over and over. "We are pleased to award you." Mom found me there, still holding it like it might disappear if I let go. She didn't say anything. Just sat beside me, slipped her arm through mine, leaned her head on my shoulder. That scholarship wasn't a fortune, not enough to quit my jobs or move into some college dorm and live like the kid I used to think I was. But it was enough for another class. Enough for a few books that didn't have to be borrowed or photocopied behind the register when my manager wasn't looking. It was enough to remind me that sometimes second chances don't come in envelopes under a bed. Sometimes you earn them, dollar by dollar, hour by hour, until someone else sees it too. The diner stayed the same, the hiss of the fryer, Doris's sharp voice barking orders, the smell of burnt coffee that clung to my hair no matter what shampoo I used. Corner Mart stayed the same, Mr. Wilkins with his scratch tickets and peppermint candies, Margie O'Hara's quiet, gentle God bless you, honey every time she shuffled out the door. The mop at the school stayed the same too, that cold plastic handle, the faint squeak on linoleum, my reflection staring back from the trophy case. But my reflection looked different now. Less like a ghost. More like someone building a life worth the sweat. One night, I asked Mom if she'd ever hated me for wasting it, the money, the years, the chance she'd bought with her own bones and hours. She didn't look up from her crossword. No, she said. Really? She laid her pencil down, looked me square in the eyes. I hated that you didn't know what it cost. But you know now. So I don't hate anything. I nodded, a lump caught in my throat so big I couldn't swallow. She reached over, squeezed my wrist, the same way she did when I was 7 and asked what was in that envelope under her bed. Sometimes, late at night, I still dream about Chicago, the rooftops, the city lights, the rush of feeling important when I wasn't. But when I wake up, I don't ache for it the way I used to. I ache for this, for the smell of cheap diner coffee at 5 a.m., for the hum of the middle school hallways, for Mom's soft footsteps down the hall when she checks if I'm still up studying. I spent her life savings in a year. I wasted it all. But I know now, money runs out. But the lesson stays. The work stays. The debt you owe to the people who love you stays until you pay it back with every hour you stand on your tired feet and keep going anyway. I don't have a degree yet. I don't have a shiny apartment or fancy shoes or friends who pretend they love you when your wallet's full. What I have is a battered mug under my desk. A mother who never stopped betting on me, even when I gave her every reason to. And a future that costs more than I ever understood, but I pay for it now, one earned dollar at a time. And this time, I don't waste a thing.